I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we're going to be watching Julian Donkey Boy. Is there any particular reason you were thinking about this film?
I Starting this week and I think going into next week, I'm gonna like watch all of his movies.
Hmm.
Harmony Korine's movies, the director and writer. Um, I think only up to this week I've only seen Kids, which is a movie he wrote and didn't direct, and he's also in it, and Spring Breakers.
Okay.
Those are the only Harmony Korine movies I've seen. So I feel like it's overdue. I need to watch all of his movies, or at least as many of them as I can find, I guess. But yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I like Harmony Korine. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen Spring Breakers, and I also seen Beach Bum. I remember when Beach Bum came out a couple of years ago, but that's it for me. So I've only seen two of his films.
The
So
most recent movies, yeah. I love Spring Breakers.
it's a fun movie. It's been a
It's a
while since
great
I've
movie.
seen it, but I had a really good time with it.
Me
So
too.
this film looks interesting.
Yeah, I think
Definitely,
it's yeah. Yeah, we'll see.
definitely in the realm of things that we watch. I don't know if
Yeah,
I
I think so, yeah.
I work with uh, the person I sit next to because we have like these stations, which are basically because I work for the legislator as a camera operator. So we basically have like these five monitor stations where we kind of do all our shit. And so the person I sit next to, he uh, he considers himself like a film buff, but he watches a lot of movies, but it's just a lot of kind of like Marvel popular movies. And it's always interesting to kind of talk movies with him. And in fact, uh, when we first met, it's kind of our first official day of session, and we're about 48, 49 days into session now. He asked what movie I want he should watch. And of course, I gave him my favorite film. It's like, I don't know if you're going to like this, but I think this is one of the greatest films of all time. I told him to watch Playtime.
Play it's playtime, yeah.
And which I think is we've done it on the podcast before. I think it's one of the greatest movies of all time. I own all of Jacques Tati's stuff on Blu-ray Criterion, and he watched it and was not a fan at all.
You told me about this. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you told me
and
about this. Yeah.
but he will not stop talking about it. I mean, like every week he
Yeah.
brings it
Yeah,
up,
you told me about that too.
which makes me think
Yeah, yeah.
like
He liked it more than you thought.
he likes it way more than I thought.
Yeah.
Like the movie did its thing, and
Hmm.
part of the reason I brought that up is this movie, Tetsuo the Iron Man,
Yeah.
not similar to Playtime in that sense by any means, but is similar in the sense that it's a movie that I can't seem to get out of my head. I mean, there's just something about it that just it sticks there. It's kind of ingrained in part of my brain. Like there's just a little spot in my brain now where Tetsuo the Iron Man lives. And
Hmm.
going into this movie, we were originally supposed to watch do this last week, and I had pushed it off so long that I didn't. I waited until literally the last minute, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and Henry was sick that weekend, and I was
Whatever.
just
Yeah.
exhausted, and I was like, I couldn't do it. But I ended up watching it later that day, and uh, and Emily actually watched a large part of it with me.
Yeah.
And this may come as a surprise to you, Andrew, but Emily did not like this film.
Oh, really?
This was not up Emily's alley.
Oh, no. Really? Oh, girl, no.
She made that very clear, very early on in the film. She was very frustrated that she couldn't really grasp the plot of the movie. She didn't really understand what
I
was
know.
going on.
That's the best part of it.
It is the best part of it. I think that's what makes the
Yeah.
movie so
I
goddamn
love
enjoyable.
it. It's like that's why it's only 67 minutes long. It's like it doesn't really like it's like a movie that has like all the like unnecessary thing like removed from it and is just like an onslaught. The movie is just like an onslaught of just like, you know, like metal and steel and just I don't know, just like this. You're just kind of like seeing this kind of like transformation come to fruition. But I understand the frustration a little bit. It can be a little like confusing when you're watching it for the first time or something like that. It can be a little bad, but I don't know. Again, you just kind of have to like rework your brain a little bit, think about it, think a little bit differently. But I understand the frustration.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's as challenging to watch as, say, perhaps The Holy Mountain, which you've also done for the podcast before. I think
This movie's pretty fun.
this
Tetsuo is
movie,
pretty fun.
it's
It's
a
funny.
very fun movie. Like it's
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 funny.
also
It
yeah, it's very funny. But I think it can be challenging to watch too. Like 67 minutes doesn't feel like a very long time for a film, and I would argue most of the time 67 minutes is not enough time, but there's just so much stuff jam packed into
mhm.
this 67 minutes. Like it is a very intense 67 minutes. As you say, they kind of peeled back all of the traditional things a movie needs. Like they've gotten rid of all of the extra stuff and just stuffed it to the brim with just the essentials of the film. And I mean, just from the very get-go, you're just kind of thrown at this extreme chaotic pace. I mean, I think of that moment early on in the beginning where that just crazy loud music is playing and he's kind of dancing, I guess is how you would describe what's
Yeah.
going
Like at the
on.
very beginning. You mean the very beginning, like during the
Very beginning.
yeah, that's like almost like a moment that's like out of like the movie's purview. It's like him like dancing like to like yeah, like industrial music, I would
Hmm.
call it. There's like
Yeah.
that's what the music is
Hmm.
basically called, industrial
100%.
music. Like Nine Inch Nails is probably the most influential industrial rock
Yeah.
band. If people don't know what that is. But yeah, he's like he's kind of like gyrating and shaking around to like the industrial music when he's in kind of like in this like industrial area, right, in the movie. It's just kind of like a little out of place moment that just kind
Hmm.
of happens during the credits or whatever. I love Shinya's his tile sequences are always really great. Like his he does like a really good job with that. And you know, he's in the movie by the way. He plays the guy who gets hit by the car.
Okay.
That's the director writer. Um, I've watched a lot of his movies over the past handful of weeks or so. I've
Hmm.
watched like I think nine of them altogether. Actually, and yesterday I actually watched the sequel to this movie, Body Hammer too. He made two other movies. He made like a second and third
Okay.
Tetsuo. The sequel was really good, by the way. I highly recommend it. Very good movie. Um, More plot stuff going on, but he did it
Hmm.
like he did a really good job with it. His like he's his movies are great. They're it's funny though, as he gets older, his movies get a little bit less, they get less and less um chaotic. You know, as he gets older, they get less chaotic.
Interesting.
He
Yeah.
includes more dramatic elements and stuff like that. He has like a really great movie that came out several years ago called Kotoko, which is about like a single mother. That movie is very sad, very sad. And movies that he's come out with the past few years are like period pieces about World War II and stuff like that, but not like war movies. It's more kind of like, I don't know, like Grave of the Fireflies type shit, I think, like of where
Oh,
of
okay. Yeah.
people being
They're like
miserable.
adjacent.
Uh
Yeah.
yeah. Like yeah, not like war movies or anything like that. There probably is violence in those movies, but you know. But yeah, he's great, great actor too. He acts, he's in this movie and he's very good in it.
Yeah.
He acts even more in his other movies. Like he like in some of his other movies later on, as he continues to make movies, he acts the fuck out of some of them. But he's really good in this movie too.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I was thinking about, because when we're watching the movie, I always think about, how am I going to talk about this movie? And this is something I was talking about with Emily as we were watching this movie, because she
Yeah.
understands, right, how we kind of run the podcast. She hears the podcasts from her room
Yeah.
just yonder. And she always asks about like movies like this where we can't, I mean, you can talk about the plot, but the plot's kind of,
I don't want to talk about like when we talk about movies nowadays for the show, I'm not always interested in being like, and then this happened, and then this
yeah.
happened. We don't
And
really
that's
do that anymore
definitely,
anyway.
yeah, I mean, that's definitely like how the podcast started. But I think as we have as grown as movie watchers and
Hmm.
just talking about it, I think that's
That's
kind
true.
of become less and less what we've talked about. I think it was a great foundation when we started, but especially just because a
Hmm.
lot of the stuff we watch, especially this year, is not plot driven. I mean, I think of like Anatomy
Yeah.
of Hell or this film. Of course, Holy Mountain is another
Yeah.
great example. We just watched a lot. I mean, Mulholland Drive, you could kind of talk about the plot, but not really. Like this year's definitely been probably the most experimental year, or maybe experimental is not
2025?
necessarily right. Yeah, the year of 26. This year for the podcast. I mean, just looking at some of the films that we've watched this year, we've definitely kind of watched more out there stuff than we have in the past, and more
Okay.
challenging stuff, at least more consistently than we have in the past. And I would say this
Yes.
this film for me was probably
Hmm.
one of the most challenging to watch. And I don't mean that in the
Really?
sense of it was hard to watch. Like I think the
Hmm.
hardest film we've ever watched for a podcast is Anatomy of Hell. That film really
Really? Wow.
yes,
Hmm.
that film took it out of me, man. That film took it out of me in a way I
I
don't
love
know
that movie.
anything else has. And I think it's a
That's
great film.
interesting.
But I
Hmm.
find this film to be challenging in the sense of like body horror
Yeah.
to
The
me
body
is
horror.
something that is very tough to watch. I
Really?
think I think
Yeah.
it's
And this
like
is.
and this is like incredible body horror. I mean, the
Mhm.
special effects here are just absolutely incredible. I mean, the very first special effect, the very first time we kind of see him put metal in his body, right? When he's putting that metal rod in his leg with the maggots.
Yeah, that first scene, yeah, that first thing where I was gonna say like him like putting that, yeah, that is that does make me cringe too. Mm.
And that's
It
sort of
looks
the
real.
it's real. What do you mean it's real?
It looks real. I said it
It
looks
looks
real.
real. Okay. I was like, I don't think he
It's
actually
not real.
puts metal in his leg. I
I
mean,
told you I've seen this movie before, right? This is a rewatch for me.
I didn't know you've seen this movie before.
Yes, I have seen this movie before. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you came in with different expectations. You kind of knew
Yes.
you knew the assignment coming in. What was
No,
it like?
I saw this movie like a few years ago.
Okay. What was it like watching it for a second time? Like, what's the difference here? Like,
There's a lot. I mean, it's such like a crazy, chaotic onslaught. I forgot a lot about it, even though the movie is so short, and it is a memorable movie. It
yeah,
definitely didn't make me forget how it made me feel,
for sure.
but there were a lot of things that I forgot. But some things I definitely did not forget at all, especially like the reveal of the drill penis. That of course is a very memorable moment, and but yeah, like the scene that you mentioned where he puts the metal rod into his leg. I forgot about that scene, so it was a shock seeing that. Like there were things about the movie that I forgot, but were very well. It was a very welcome. It was very welcome to see some stuff appear again. The guy who plays the main character, Tomoro Taguchi, he's very famous now, by the way. If you look him up, he has like hundreds of
Really?
like acting credits. Yeah, you've probably seen him in
Wow.
something else.
Okay.
He's very good, very expressive face.
Yes.
I like his like slick backed hair.
Mhm.
Like not slick back, it's more slicked over hair. His glasses and stuff. He's got a very like expressive acting face. But yeah, watching it again, I was still just as impressed by it. I was thinking about how good of a decision it was to put the movie in black and white, just because like I think if it wasn't in black and white, uh, the effects might probably wouldn't look as good.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm that was definitely part of the decision in this. And I think too, just I mean, I think of a film like Eraserhead, and there's
That too.
something about industrial that just looks right, just like industrial scenes
Yeah.
look better in black and white. Like they're
Eraserhead is a good like spiritual like kind of like twin to this movie, I think, in a
right.
weird way. Hmm.
I mean, that was the first double feature I was thinking of when watching this films, just because I mean, in some ways they are very different films, and they do very different things, and they kind of work on different levels,
Mhm.
but just think it from the aspect of the corruption of this industrial world that is literally consuming us. Uh,
This urban kind of
this
city,
very urban environment that,
which is a thing that comes up in Tsukamoto movies, by the way. Kind of like the how kind of like awful urban and city life is, how
Mhm.
lonely it is, how destructive it is. He kind of, it's funny. I think Tsukamoto, like, he kind of has this sort of like disdain for it, but I think it's one of the things that he knows best. So his movies, they take place in cities. They're about people that, live in cities, things like that. And of course, like I said, I think some of his later movies aren't really like necessarily about that.
Hmm.
But right now, I think he's kind of has this sort of like disdain for kind of like, modern life, city life, urban life, how kind of constrictive it is, how difficult it is, how kind of, it's kind of, it's the simultaneous thing of it being a very lonely way to live, but also you're less lonely than ever before in history, so,
Hmm.
that comes up a lot in his movies.
Yeah, and I did not expect this film to be as sexual as it was.
Yeah,
There's
it is. Yeah.
it was not something I was walking into expecting it to be a very sexual movie. Hank watched this movie with me as much as Henry can watch any movie at 3 months old. Although he is starting to get to the point where he'll look at something for long periods of time. So I will say Hank was a fan of this film. He had a lot of fun with all the different just kind of movements and structures, and yeah, especially the reveal of his penis being a
His
drill.
penis.
Did
Yeah.
not see that coming, and that
Yeah.
was very very creative, and just that whole very violent scene where
With his girlfriend.
with his girlfriend, yeah,
Yeah, that scene is just like, what the fuck is going on? They're
and
like fucking, they flail around and stuff. Like, wow.
in that moment, that kind of like eats at your ears where she's biting the fork. And you know that sound, which they
Yes.
capture that sound perfectly, of like someone's teeth hitting a
Yeah,
fork.
it's
Like,
like for him, it's like magnified. Yeah, like
mhm.
it's like his transformation is causing him to like hear it more clearly, I guess. It's like
Yeah,
being magnified. Yeah,
it's one of the worst sounds in the world, and I think
I
they
know.
capture that sound perfectly. Like it just kind of it makes your skin crawl the way, uh, just like, and it's not even like what's worse. It's almost what's worse than hearing the sound of someone else's teeth hit a fork is when your own teeth hit a fork, and that's what it sounds like, right? It feels almost
Yeah,
internal, as if it's coming from like the inside
yeah,
of this person, and this is a very internal experience in which like everything is just kind of we're just thrown inside of this person, of these people, and kind of have to experience the world that they do. And I think one of the
yeah.
things that's so impressive is the the transformation into this metal, the Iron Man,
Yeah,
is so incredible for a lot of reasons and incredible special effects. But almost every time we see the Iron Man, they have adjusted and added to
mm,
the piece, the set, the design. I mean, it's not just maximalist, but it's maximalist to the extent that it is constantly changing, and that's even more impressive than just like, right? I mean, it's one thing to at one point in the film just be like, he's the Iron Man. Here's like what his suit or whatever looks like, and we're done. I mean, it just seems like they're constantly adding to it. There's constantly new metal pieces being added to it,
yeah.
whether it's, uh, you know, the little rockets on his
Wires.
legs or the wires or
Yeah,
the pieces of metal coming out of him. Like it's constantly
mm.
changing, and just trying to keep up with it and just seeing like all the different things, like it's just so
It's
creative
hard. Yeah,
and thoughtful, and it's a lot, right? It's just like,
which is why I think like the black and white is good because with the black and white, you don't necessarily have to worry about things like matching or anything like
yep.
that. You know what I mean? Like in terms of color, you can
Hmm.
just sort of like put whatever on there, whatever like looks the best, looks the craziest. Because it all looks, it all looks the same anyway, right? In terms of at least like the colors,
Hmm.
But yeah, that part of it is so good. And Shinya, and he does a lot of this, and he does a lot of this stuff in his early movies, of course. His use of like stop motion
Yeah.
too. He loves the stop motion shit. Like when I love when like yeah, like he does that a lot. When it gets particularly like overwhelming when a a Shinya stop motion sequence is occurring, especially like a transformation sequence like you were talking about, where like the
Mhm.
metal and stuff is flying all around him and stuff like that. Like that can get kind of like overwhelming.
Yeah, I love that moment where he's rocketed through the city, and they're doing this
Yeah.
part stop motion, part like fast forward thing going on, and it just feels very like chaotic, and we're moving at 1,000 miles per hour, and and he's just plummeting through the city. It's just a very interesting way to kind of show a sense of speed. I think that's one of the hard things to do in film, and that's why I'm always impressed by like a well-made racing movie. And when I say racing, I mean like car racing,
Car, yeah.
because on film, it's very hard to create a sense of speed. Just
Yeah.
because of like the way film works and just like angles and just like right basic physics. And so like to create a sense of speed, I find it's very hard to do well. And I think this film, even though no one's racing, uh, when we're in those moments or just really any moment that
Yeah.
requires speed, I think the use of stop motion is a really interesting way to trick our brain and to think that
Hmm.
we're moving very quickly because you're missing those frames, right? Because you're not
Yeah, you
getting
are. That's true.
the full experience. It's just like you're literally jumping from one place to
It
another.
looks cool too.
It
It
looks
looks cool too, and and despite the fact that it probably does take a lot of time and work, it doesn't necessarily require any kind of like special.
hmm
It probably didn't require any special editing or effects or anything like that. You just need to move and take a frame, and then you move again and you take. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're talking about where they're kind of like floating and stuff like
Yep.
that, like
hmm
on the streets and stuff like that. Yeah, like those moments, yeah, are like again like they probably didn't require too much extra cost. It just takes a lot of time to just, take a frame, walk over, take a frame. Again, Shinny uses that a lot of people kind of like floating
Yeah.
like through like a street or something like that. It's very anime.
hmm
Uh, there's something very kind of, yeah, anime animation about it. Obviously, kind of is, stop motion, it's animation, I guess. Um, but yeah, I just love it. He does a really good job with that stuff. It's very he's just a great director, He's just like so inventive, creative. Um, his stuff is just so this movie in particular, more than any other of his movies, just feels like it's just bursting at the seams, you know what I mean? Like it's good that this movie's only 67 minutes long just because I think it can only be contained like in that space. It just again, it just like, and obviously like there's the things with like, plot, it's confusing, what's going on. But I just think that like that is just kind of like the nature of the movie, and that like it doesn't adhere to these sort of, typical notions and ideas of like story and plot and characters and all this stuff. It just has to be contained in sort of like this, film, this that energy, that power. So this movie of his is particularly powerful, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I watching this with Emily was a really interesting experience because she's watched a couple of the films in the past and she never usually actively watches the movie. Usually she's scrolling on her phone, she's reading a book, she's doing something else while the movie's going on. But I will say, for better or worse, she did actively watch this movie and she had a lot of questions. And there was this assumption that because she was coming in about halfway through the movie, that I would have the answer to any of these
Yeah,
questions. And I think back to one of our most popular episodes, The Holy Mountain, and when we watched that film, and
one of the best movies of all time.
I think it's a similar experience in that you just kind of need to be in the space. I think one of the reasons Emily struggled with this film is she spent the whole time trying to understand what's going on and trying to just
Yeah.
grasp the plot and trying to connect things. Right? She's trying to make these connections like, oh, this means this and that means that. And I think that is part of the reason that the experience was a little miserable for her and like she didn't enjoy the experience as much as she could because it is one of those films that is so jam packed with stuff that if you try to take the time to peel
You
back
miss so
everything that's
much.
going on, you're gonna miss everything, right? Because by the
Yeah.
time you figure out, oh, this one thing is going on, you'll miss seven other things that have happened since then. And again, right, those 67 minutes, they move so fast, but I don't know if you could take any more than 67 minutes of this because there is just so much stuff jam-packed. And that's not to say I want it to be pulled out to a longer period of time. That's not to say, oh, I'd like the same amount of stuff, but over 90 minutes or 2 hours, because I think part of the experience is being overwhelmed. Like the whole idea is
Hmm.
that we are being, right, consumed by this metal, we're being consumed by this city, we're being consumed by
Yeah.
garbage and just this industrial waste.
Yeah.
And it's an overwhelming experience. And that's
Hmm.
what they want you to have when you watch this film. Like that is the success
Hmm.
of this film is that you as a person, like you feel like garbage. You
Yeah.
you feel overwhelmed from the experience. And that's
Hmm.
purposeful. That is not by accident. I think if we're talking about the big difference between like this and the Holy Mountain is Holy Mountain comes it's just as strange and weird and challenging, but the Holy Mountain comes a lot slower. The pace is very different and it's a lot
Yeah,
more
it has like
time,
it has a South American sensibility to it as well. Kind
right?
of,
And it's kind
fantastical.
of
Yeah.
and it's kind of like sitting there and just kind of being with it and flowing with it, where this is very different in the sense that it is you don't get to flow with it. You're thrown into this place and you're just tossed around like a rag doll
You are tossed around. Yeah.
from bit to bit to bit. And
Hmm.
if you ever try to gather your bearings at any moment, it's too late. They're already on to the next thing. They're already on to the
Yeah.
next bit. They're already on to the next moment. And you just have to let your body go limp and just allow yourself to be thrown around and just be pushed
Hmm.
and bruised and enjoy that and just
Yeah.
live in that just grossness and incredible horror.
Hmm.
And I think of that scene where he is on that park bench with the woman and the kind of bubbling of skin. Like that is such an incredible effect, and it is just
Yeah.
it's one of the most visceral effects I think in body horror is that effect of something about flesh, right? The combination of like
Yeah.
flesh and metal is so off-putting, and I think what
It's
makes
awesome.
that somehow more off-putting than maybe some of the later stuff is you can almost imagine it, right? You can kind of like you can feel your own flesh peeling back and bubbling away.
Hmm.
And I think like later in the film, it's become so mechanical that you can distance yourself a little bit from it. Like it doesn't feel like you are right being eaten by metal as much. It's like in the early scenes. But those moments of anything where it's like a combination of flesh and metal, those are the scenes that always sort of like hit me the hardest and kind of like because you can feel it, right? You can kind of feel the cold metal on your skin or like in your bones or like the maggots, right? Just like crawling through there. It's just so gross and just
Hmm.
you know what I mean?
Or like in the morning when he's shaving and he has like the thing in his
Yeah.
face and he like takes it out and he like splurts blood everywhere. I like too that like with the black and white like it makes like it makes blood look like motor oil,
Hmm.
like it kind of like I kind of like that aspect as well, and he like yeah, he takes it out and it splurts everywhere and it's like disgusting. And then yeah, of course that's kind of like the beginning of his transformation, right? As he turns into the Iron Man. Um but yeah, like um, yeah, I'm trying to think. I think that uh, I lost my train of thought. I don't understand. Hmm.
You
Hmm.
just it's gone. It's
Well,
just
actually, what, I did think of something. You were talking about too, of course, about kind of like his sort of kind of course the combination of like the flesh and the steel, the metal kind of
yeah.
technology, things like that. It kind of reminded me of the book and movie Crash. I don't know if you've ever wrote that. I don't know if you've ever watched that movie. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
Mm-mm.
The book is a great book. And the book was adapted into a movie by David Cronenberg. It's a
Right.
great film, great 90s Cronenberg film. And of course, it makes me think of Cronenberg in general. His movies are less chaotic than this. They really are. Like they're more temperamental, really.
Yeah.
They're more kind of chill and
Hmm.
they're more about like people sitting around talking than this. Uh, this is like, you know, this is almost over the top. But the Cronenberg movies do kind of have the same thing where they operate on kind of like that's kind of like philosophical level of like, you know, it seems like it's a bad thing, right? Like kind of like the combination of like these two things of like the flesh
Mhm.
and the steel, the metal. But by the end of this movie and by the end of like a lot of other Cronenberg movies, there's kind of like this thing of like sort of like accepting it,
Yeah.
this acceptance that it's going to happen and that actually might not actually be a bad thing. We actually might be able to see even more horizons than we ever thought possible. Right. And Crash is kind of the same thing where it's kind of like the book and the movie. It's kind of like about kind of Crash is also about love. It's a very erotic book, a very erotic movie.
Mhm.
Kind of like Tetsuo, as you said, very
Yeah.
erotic. So it kind of makes sense. But but yeah, it's kind of like about like again, like this sort of learn to love and even enjoy kind of this intrusion, of the steel, of the glass, of the metal, and sort of like embodying it into as if we are one, which is kind of what happens again at the end of this movie in particular in Tetsuo. And I find that very interesting, just because like it's sort of like again, like I think Shinya is looking at it kind of like negatively. He kind of obviously is very like he's an old man, so he's probably thinking like, fuck technology,
Yeah.
fuck cities, fuck all this shit. But at the same time, I don't think I still think, he kind of is also on this thing of like, well, what if we could, you know, physically put our bodies together with this thing of technology, of kind of like this industrialness? What if we could become like a new specimen? And that's really interesting, I think, because it kind of leads to kind of like, conversations of, becoming, uh, you know, something even greater than ourselves. So I always like stuff like that. Cronenberg does it all the time in his movies, and Shinny does that quite often as well.
Yeah, I was certainly thinking of Cronenberg, particularly Videodrome was the first film
Yeah,
that came to mind when I thought of this. Just the idea of, and this is something that Cronenberg has always been interested in, is this idea of we consume technology, we become consumers of technology, we become slaves of technology, but then what
mhm,
if which is what you're talking about, is if we invert that and instead of allowing technology to consume us, right, to kind of take away us, what if it becomes the other way around where we adapt to it and become part of it
mhm.
and become the thing that we're trying to run away from. And if we can't escape it, if we can't escape this industrial metal iron garbage that is collecting and
Yeah.
building around us, like this is something that's going to happen no matter what you do, and there is no stopping it. And
Mhm.
the options are you can kind of just sit back and be sad about it, or you can embrace it. And I think there is a bit of that in this, and there's obviously the anger and the frustration of that, right? Of the metal and the technology kind of taking us over and the loneliness of it. But then also part of it is it's going to happen and we're doomed to this. So the very least we can do is embrace that. I mean, I think of the end of the film where these two men have become this one giant metal conglomerate. I'm not exactly sure
Yeah.
how you
They
describe it, right?
just like
This
they
giant
become
tower
the
of
Iron
metal.
Man. I know. Yeah.
It
It's so
becomes
cool. It looks so cool.
it
It's so
looks
cool. It
incredible.
it kind of reminds me of you know, I didn't like this movie and I don't think you've seen it, but like at the end of this, there's like a part that happens at the end of The Substance that kind of reminds me of this part. There's a lot of like movies that do this thing though, where they combine like different people together into like a big
Yeah.
conglomeration. It's just that usually it's like flesh, some kind of like
Hmm.
flesh abomination. This is more like a flesh and metal abomination, which is interesting.
Yeah, and there's those final lines, right? We are metal. Let's make the whole world metal, or right, something to
Yeah,
that
yeah,
extent.
yeah.
Like they're gonna take over. the whole world or the
Yeah, they
just
love each other. We'll destroy the
industrialness.
world with our love.
Well, what a great line.
I
We'll
know.
destroy the world with our love. Like, just like there's something half ironic about it because these men are kind of like fighting to the death. Like, there's that great moment, which
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what movie I'm thinking of that has something similar to it, but where his head and neck kind of like crawl away from his body, it's like reaching away, and there's like I have a scene in my mind of like seeing that, right? I can see that in something, and I can't think of whether it was a film or a TV show, but there's some media that feels like it was inspired by the scene, right? It feels like it came after this moment, but there's just
Hmm.
something very similar about that, and I can't quite get my head around what it was. Something part of me thinks it was like an animated show, possibly,
Hmm.
which definitely narrows it down for me because I don't watch a lot of animated shows. But there's something about that is just like so familiar. Just about like the floating head with like this weird like neck and again a great use of stop motion and the neck kind of like crawling around
Hmm.
and moving around in all these like weird and interesting ways. And yeah, just that line of we will destroy the world with love, or
With our love, yeah.
with our love. We will destroy the world with our love.
Yeah. And I think they love each other, right? Because like they're basically like they were fighting before, but I think now they've sort of like come together
They've
into
become
one
one.
unit because they're both basically totally unique from everyone else, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? It's kind of like they're like soulmates, you know?
Yeah, right. There is that sense of they they think that they are the only one like this, right? That they're the only one like going through this thing, and then they find each other, and so they try to destroy each other because they want to be the only
Right.
Iron Man.
And
But
also it's there's all so that revenge thing, right? Because
right.
the Shinya's character, he gets hit. The ensuing incident in the movie is that he gets hit by a car,
Hmm.
driven by the young salaryman guy,
Hmm.
and that sort of sets off the whole chain of events where he becomes an Iron Man, and they both kind of realize that they both have like magical Iron Man abilities, I guess. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, there is that unexplainable, nor does it need to be explained, way they can kind of control these contraptions. Like when they're in that final industrial fighting scene, they can
Mhm.
control the sort of the mechanical machines and
Mhm.
can move around without like actually touching them. Like they just have this sense
They have
of
like they just have telepathic abilities, yeah.
yeah, and you're just like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's a thing that's
Yeah.
happening now, and you're
There's
with it.
something kind of there's something kind of maybe a little too I just kind of had this realization too. There's something maybe a little like I wonder too if like there's like maybe like a point that is either being made a couple different ways. Either one, it could be a point about maybe like pollution, right? Like pollution causing people to become freaks, right? Like to have like these
Mm.
abilities. Um, or maybe it's like a comment about post World War II Japan after the nuclear bomb. Maybe radiation causing people to become that way too. I don't know. I just had that thought randomly that either one or both of those points could be made about why they are the way that they are.
Oh yeah, I mean, I when watching this movie, that was definitely one of the thoughts that came to my mind. I was thinking of a very different filmmaker, Ozu, and which would be a very weird double feature with this film if you did like Tokyo Story or something like that. But well, what I was thinking about the similarities between these, and I think we've watched a lot of Japanese films for this podcast, and even this year, I think this is our third Japanese film that we've
They're
watched.
good.
No, maybe it's our second, but. Thinking about, and this is like very particular to Japan because Japan was an isolationist country before World War II. And then they're thrown into this extremely modern world and this extreme modernization that came in a very short amount of
Hmm.
time in Japan. And they become the technological leaders of the world very quickly, from a point where they're, basically living the same way for thousands of years, and suddenly they're thrown into the future. And this very extreme separation between the older and younger generation, in which this older generation has lived the same way, their great great
Hmm.
great grandfathers lived and live in the same houses and kind of have like the same traditions that have gone back for generations and generations. And then this new generation, this younger generation that is boldly embracing and I think there is a bit of this, right, where they are embracing the very thing that tried to destroy them, like the way to kind of,
Hmm.
because the United States comes, drops two nuclear bombs on the country of Japan, the only nuclear bombs that are ever dropped in human history on other human beings.
Hmm.
And the reaction to that is to basically appropriate American culture and make it their own and kind of which is like such a it's such an interesting reaction because you would think the obvious
I
reaction
mean,
would
I mean, I also think that like America we were so pushy. You know, we were so pushy about getting involved that I think Japan probably felt like they didn't have very many options.
mm,
But you're right, like they weren't at the Japanese government, the Japanese leadership weren't too antagonistic even after that happened.
right. Well, I just think of like the embracing of like right baseball becomes very big there and then like a lot of
Yeah,
like
culturally is what you're saying.
I'm saying like from a cultural aspect, right? You think of
Okay.
like a lot of those like 1950s and 1960s Japanese movies
Yeah.
and like this taking out of like American culture and exploring American culture and
Hmm.
kind of adapting it and making it their own. And there definitely is something here about, I mean, it's hard not to put a Japanese films of this era or almost any era after World War II in the context of nuclear warfare because like
Yeah.
right, it is so much ingrained in the history. And it's hard to ignore that, and especially in a film like this that is exploring like these weird transformations, right? And these
Yeah.
almost radiations, if you will, that are consuming them and changing them for better and for worse. And instead of sort of fighting against it, embracing this radiation, right? Of course, we watched Godzilla, what, about a year ago now, or maybe not even a year ago for this
Not even a year
podcast.
ago.
And of course, nuclear warfare is very prominent
Yeah.
in that
It's
film,
like
right?
right. The
And
movie
this,
was made like right after it. Like,
right, it's made like right
yeah.
after, and there's very much this exploration of the ramifications of nuclear warfare and
Hmm.
radiation, and I think there is something about that in this. I think there is something to be said about this idea of how we kind of open this Pandora's box when we
Yes.
created, like, not even when we dropped the nuclear bomb, by the very creation of the nuclear bomb itself. And we can't go back. Like, there is no going back. There's no reverting to a simpler time,
Yeah.
to
No.
a time before this. Like, it's over, right? Once you open that box, like, it can't be closed. You've released chaos into the world. You've released this industrial enslavement into the world, and you can try to fight it. You can try to be angry by it and go against it, but the fact is that you are going to be consumed about it.
Hmm.
And I think the big, right, the moment at the end is that realization that these two people kind of are one, and that is kind of like the magical thing about like this industrial mechanical thing is it's kind of created. I mean, you said it near the beginning where we're lonelier than ever, but then at the same time we're more connected than ever, and this radiation, this iron, this metal, this whatever has, as humans, kind of uh, put us into one giant conglomerate, right? We're kind of all kind of we've put ourselves in this place together, and there's kind of nothing we can do about it. We're all latched to each other in this weird way, right? Just the weird world economy. Like it's no longer just like this
Yeah.
country does its own thing and that country does its own thing. Like we're all this one thing, and it's gonna happen no matter what. So might as well embrace it and become one with it for better or worse. Like that's what's happening.
Yeah, and I think that um again, yeah, like I think embracing it is it's still just but there's also kind of like that uh uh, it's kind of funny though because like the ending is kind of nice, I guess you could say, right? Because they kind of are like together, right? And they sort of, I guess, found this purpose, but now they're going to create more destruction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which that's kind of like a big part of like Shinya's movies too. Kind of like the discussion and the essence of destruction, kind of destroying your body, destroying kind of like your relationship, your family unit, destroying the world around you, and destroying the world in general, right? That's kind of like what it comes down to by the end of this movie in particular. Kind of destroying kind of the things that, these things that we hold near and dear to ourselves, right? That we think we are, that we think are pure and whether it be like marriage or things like that, our family units. In the sequel, this is particularly in Tetsuo 2,
Mhm.
this is a subject that comes up a lot, like the family, siblings, parents. That comes up a lot in the second movie, actually. This first movie is more kind of about like, sex, relationships, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, that's a big part of this movie, kind of like that discussion of destruction, and the nature of it, and kind of like, what it means to kind of like destroy ourselves, and kind of like become something other, destroying ourselves in order to be something that's even inconceivable, in order to reach, I don't know, something, like something even like higher than being like a Japanese salary man, which is what the main character is basically. He's just a kind of like a
Right.
business, probably office worker guy. And so, you know, what's more preferable, being that or being kind of like a horrific kind of like conglomerate monster that can sort of envelop the world. That
Mhm.
kind of thing is, I think, very interesting to me because it doesn't posit this idea of evil. It doesn't really like talk about evil. I think like the sometimes I think like the discussion of good versus evil can be a little like boring and
Mhm.
simplistic and very black and white. I find it more interesting to kind of like talk about like the capabilities that people have to be, I don't know, different from themselves or more you know what I mean? Kind of like
Yeah.
just like people's capabilities to be evil or bad or uh you know uh or just overall just like kind of like different, and willing to kind of do certain things if given the opportunity. Um I find that interesting more than just kind of like, you can make like a really boring version of this movie where there's a hero, there's a villain, you know, uh and you could, implement all these different, Tetsuo, Iron Man, Shinya, body horror, stop motion stuff into it. I guess you could do that, like a Marvel movie, right? Like
Yeah.
there's good guys, there's bad guys. But I don't really like that very much. I like more kind of like this sort of like ambiguous thing.
Yeah. I mean, there really is no good or bad person in this. And I don't know if that's like, because, when I think of like David Lynch, he has this very specific idea, because we were talking about Razorhead earlier, of what evil is. And this very specific idea that evilness is something that, which I think is a very like intriguing way to see evilness, is that it's not something that is in a person or like something that the person
Hmm.
chooses to do, but rather evil is sort of this almost spiritual being that can
Hmm.
consume any person, right? It can go from person to person. I mean, of course, Twin Peaks,
Yeah,
I think,
it's kind of
is the best
yeah,
experience of that. And I don't
yeah.
think necessarily this is that, right? I don't think this is necessarily
No.
that there's an evilness that is coming in and consuming this people. I think it's almost
It's less spiritual. This movie's less spiritual than any David Lynch movie, in my
for
opinion, which is
sure,
fine.
and it's much less it's almost jumping around the whole idea of like good and evil entirely. Like it's not even a
Yeah.
question in this film.
Yeah.
Like there's never this sort of like moral quandary of if they're doing the right thing or
hmm
the wrong thing.
I guess he
It's
does kind of assault his girlfriend, which, is a bad
that's
thing.
yeah.
Uh, but it's he's like overcome with like these strange transformations, like he's like totally just spiraling.
But there's no judgment, I suppose, behind anything that's happening, right? There's
No,
no
no,
sense of like this is a good thing or this is a
no.
bad thing or like right there's no sense of and this is why I talked to like Joey about and like my frustration with because his whole thing is like a great movie has to have a great score. Like if you don't have a great score, it's not a great movie. Blah blah blah. And this was his big problem with
What?
Playtime because Playtime has very
What
little
the
score,
fuck,
and
bro?
and
What's
I'm
a movie that doesn't have a score? What's a movie that doesn't have any
well,
music at
Playtime
all?
has almost no score. No Country for Old Men has very little
No,
score.
I was about to say No Country for Men has basically no music.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of what else doesn't have any
There's not a
music.
lot. There's not a lot of
There's not a
options out
lot.
there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There are, I mean, there are options, I guess. Um, yeah.
I mean,
Anyway,
certainly a lot of like early, I mean, really, right? A lot of the 1930s, 40s, especially talkies, right? There's not a lot of score in those because they are so,
that's true.
um,
Usually just during like credit sequences and
usually
stuff
just
like
like
that, or
credit
like
sequence.
transitions, but not during
Yeah,
while people are
not
like
like,
having
yeah.
scenes.
And I think
I like the music in this movie though.
the music in this movie is great.
I like the music.
But I think where I was trying to go with this was this idea that often a score music is used as a crutch to say you are supposed to feel this
Of
thing in
course,
the scene, right? You're supposed to feel happy, you're supposed to feel
it's
sad, you're supposed to feel
manipulative.
angry. It's manipulative. It's incredibly manipulative.
Yeah.
And
And
I
like
think
Marvel movies are probably the worst about that.
oh,
Like the
100%.
sappy kind of orchestral like stuff,
Oh yeah,
just kind
like
of like, it's just kind of like
it's
okay. And
cheating.
and
Like
it's
it's
and it's like music too that's not even like memorable or has like an like at
no.
least like the old Star Wars movies,
Hmm.
like obviously those scores are very sappy, but they're very memorable, they're very iconic
Yeah.
music,
Yeah, like
like everybody
Jaws,
knows that music. Jaws, of course, um, like if it sticks out as like it can be like really impactful, but like when you watch like a Marvel movie or something like, or even not just a Marvel movie, probably any movie, go to walk in any movie theater that's not even a Marvel, and it'll probably have some just like simplistic, boring, like totally unmemorable orchestral score sort of like laid on it in order to sort of sell the fact that this scene is sad, this scene is happy,
yeah.
like
Oh yeah. It's too common and I think not that this film doesn't have a score, and I think this film has a great score,
yes,
but
awesome.
I think it
And
has
the
more.
sound effects too, by the way. The sound effects
It's incredible sound design,
are
which is again one of the
crazy.
reasons I was going to David Lynch, right? Because David Lynch sound design is his whole thing, and
Right,
I
too.
think I
This is,
think
yeah, yeah.
sound design, like the choice to go black and white and the choice of sound design here, like enhances the film
The sound design was probably the hardest part.
significantly.
I don't know that,
100%.
but like because you have to like edit like the sounds with like the different frames of like the footage
It's
of like this or that,
incredible.
it's just like it's
It's very
ridiculous.
thoughtful and it changes the film. I think without the sound design you lose a lot of like it just doesn't feel nearly as real as it does. And again, going back to the idea of like when I was talking about the score, I guess what I was trying to get at was this idea that there's no moral judgment here, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's something that frustrates me a lot with a lot of films, old films, new films, just a lot of films in general, just popular films more likely, because there's this manipulation of saying you need to feel this thing, right? We are saying like this is how you need to live in the world. This is what you need to do. Kind of there's a sense of authority that can be very frustrating. And what I love about this is I think that's not here, right? There's no sense of like this is good or this is bad or you need to feel this way. It's rather just presenting things as they are, is just presenting the the series of events without saying like you need to feel angry at this moment or you need to feel sad or you
Yeah.
need to feel happy. You kind of just have to like it forces you to figure it out on your own, right? It forces you
Mhm.
to work. I mean, I think we talk about this a lot on the podcast. And I think we've watched a lot of films like this. And I think it just proves that we've watched a lot of good films on this podcast. Is we watch a lot of films that are work, right? I mean, they're fun. We have
Sure.
great times with them. But like you have to be actively engaged with these movies. These movies don't work if you just kind of sit back, scroll on your phone, and just let
Well,
them happen, right?
yeah, I think this movie is really fun though. I think anyone
100%.
I think anyone around our age or younger would be able to appreciate this movie. But again, like you said, you just kind of have to like really focus in on it.
Yeah. And there is like something very youthful about this film. I think there really
It
is an
is.
exploration of like what it means to
Yeah.
be like young in the world. And I feel like we're kind of
It's a
on the
really
cusp of
exciting
that.
it's a very like exciting kind of punked out movie too, you
Hmm.
know, like it has kind of like that sort of, you know, punk rock mentality, I feel, you know, or like kind of like that metal music kind of thing going on that I like a lot and that I think plenty of people would be able to identify with.
Yeah, I think it's I think we have definitely watched movies in the past that are specific and not necessarily everyone would love them. But I do genuinely think if you are willing to if you're
You
willing
just
to
have to
take
sit
the
for an
time,
hour.
right? You only have,
It's just an hour.
67 minutes, 67 minutes of your time. It's like no
It's
time at all. And like if you're just willing to be in the experience for a little bit, I think this is definitely one of the more films that it
exciting, interesting.
yeah, exciting, interesting films that I think anyone right the general public I think could enjoy, right? Anyone in the general public would be like, "Whoa, like this is weird." And
There's really nothing like it. I can't think of anything else.
no, not at all. Like people who are like the substance is like, oh, this great, like fantastic movie. I think you should watch something like this, right? See,
Yeah, you
see
should
what we're
watch
actually
this.
doing in body horror. Like, see what body horror can actually be,
This is much
uh,
better.
and just like right an actual exploration of these thoughts and ideas, right?
I
Because
think if you
I
like anime, you know, this is kind
think
of
it's a great move for like people who love anime.
yeah,
Yeah, there's definitely like a lot of inspiration from it and to it and around it, right? I thought of a movie we watched for this podcast. What was it? Perfect Blue. I think it might have
yeah,
been the film that I was
yeah.
thinking of when I was
Satoshi Kon,
watching
yeah,
this. So yeah, this film like whether it's inspiration from or inspiration towards, like there's just a lot of other films going through my head when I watch this. And that's not
yeah,
always the case. I don't always have, and that's not to say like it's better or worse, but I always think it's interesting when I can kind of like this Rolodex of films kind of comes up when I'm watching. I'm like, oh, I'm
yeah,
really thinking of like this thing. And I think it just shows like how impactful this film is on the world.
yeah,
Even if like, right, not hundreds of millions of people have seen it, I think there's something impactful about the cinema that was being made and the thing that it was doing and the ideas that was pushing along, right? It's doing the great thing the cinema does. It's like it's a film that makes you like think about it, like it's stuck in your head. And I
hmm
think in that way, like it's as good as it gets.
yeah. And I guess like I'll just like conclude and real quick and just
Yeah, yeah.
saying that like yeah, I totally agree and just yeah, I love the movie. I think it's like one of the coolest things ever made. It really is. It's just kind of like you know the way that it looks, the way that it's made. You know, it's such an onslaught. And, you know, I just like really appreciate a movie that just like totally just goes all out. It just goes all out. It just doesn't like let up at all. And it's totally unconcerned with a lot of stuff that we discussed. It's just totally concerned with a lot of like the typical elements that you might see in a feature film. It really is kind of like this amazing object and it's just like a really kind of like freeing movie to watch. You know, when you watch it, you're just kind of like, yes, you know, like I'm there, you know. And like you said though, it's not like this sort of moral tale either, which I find also very freeing, you know, that it's just kind of like this it's just the way that it is, you know, and um you know, it's a very intelligent film, it's a very well-made film. You know, for me, like this is just like a 10 out of 10 film.
Yeah, I think you said it best when you said this is a freeing film. Like it just it feels as if it's a film that doesn't feel the need at any point to kind of please anyone. And that's not to say that this film isn't pleasing or exciting or fun. I think it's all of these things. But this is so I've been listening to a lot of music lately, a lot of music, just because of my job allows me to kind of put headphones in and listen to music all day. And so I was listening to Erica Badu, who's a great artist, of course, famously. She was with Andre 3000 and I was listening to this interview Childish Gambino, Donald Glover was giving, and he met Erica Badu, and he was very worried about this last album that he released like a year or so ago, and she said, our job isn't to make food that people like. Our job is just to make the food, and their job is to eat it. And they'll eat it however they want, but they're going to eat it. And I think that's a great kind of way to kind of make your art. And I think that's exactly what's going on here, which is like the art is being made and it's not telling you how to consume it. It's not telling you that you need to be happy at this moment or sad at this moment. I think there is this sense very often, particularly with bigger productions, that you need to feel this specific thing at this specific time. And to just let go of that, to just be like, I'm going to make a piece of art and it's going to be really cool and exciting. And, I'm not concerned about like these moral statements of good or evil or happy or sadness. I'm just going to make something really exciting. And yeah, I don't know if I'm quite at a 10 out of 10 yet, but it might be on a future watch. So I'm going to give this a very strong 9 out of 10.
Okay. Cool.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo. I forgot my
I'm
name.
on Letterboxd at Retro Ranger, R-A-T-R-0 Ranger.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And with nothing to say, thank you all for listening.
Thanks again.